Welcome, from finding your way home to landing a jumbo jet or even syncing up global financial markets, satellite navigation is this incredible, invisible utility that basically runs our modern world. But have you ever stopped to think, who actually makes the rules for it? You'd probably assume there's a pretty clear answer. But the reality? It's way more complicated and honestly, a little unsettling. So, how does this magic trick even work? Well, at its core, the idea is actually pretty straightforward. Your phone is constantly listening for signals from a whole constellation of satellites orbiting the Earth. And by measuring the tiniest differences in the time it takes for a signal to arrive from at least 4 of those satellites, it can pinpoint your exact location, your altitude, even how fast you're going, all down to just a few feet. This whole process, it's called trilateration, and it's happening billions of times a day, all over the planet, totally unseen. And that really brings us to the heart of the matter. This technology is everywhere. It's absolutely essential. So, who's in charge? Who's governing the system that we all depend on so completely? All right, to really get to the bottom of this, we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at just how deeply this stuff is wired into our lives. Then, we'll explore the legal Wild West that it operates in. We'll cover the old rules we're trying to use, see where the cracks are forming, and finally, ask, is there a path forward? Okay, so let's start with just how indispensable this technology has become because, it's about so much more than just maps on your phone. The stakes here are just incredibly high. I mean, think about it. Aviation and shipping, they need it for safe navigation. Militaries all over the world depend on it for precision. Our phone networks and even the entire global financial system, they need its hyper-accurate timing signals just to function at all. And yeah, of course, it's also what powers the app that gets you home. It is not an exaggeration to say it's woven into the very fabric of our society. So, for a system this critical, you would think there's a super robust set of international laws governing it, right? Well, that's where this story takes a really surprising turn. And here it is. This is the crucial point. There is no GPS treaty, no single dedicated international agreement that lays out the rules for providing and using satellite navigation. Nope. Instead, it operates in this legal gray area, governed by a patchwork of much older, much more general space laws. So if there isn't a specific rulebook, what are we using? Essentially, we're applying laws that were written back in the 1960s, at the very dawn of the space age, to a 21st century technology. The legal framework that we have basically rests on 3 main pillars. You've got the big one, the Outer Space Treaty from 1967, the Registration Convention, which is about tracking what's up there, and then some general principles of international law. The key thing to get here is that these were designed for the first steps of space exploration, not for the constant, precise demands of a global information utility. And if you actually look at the core principles of that Outer Space Treaty, you see how broad they are. Space is for everyone. No one can own the moon, and countries are responsible for what they do up there. These are fantastic, really important ideas. But notice what's missing? There's nothing about guaranteeing the quality of a GPS signal or figuring out who's liable if it fails. And right there, that's where the cracks start to show. When you try to apply these super general rules to something as specific and as vital as SatNav, you find some major gaps. Let's just break down these loopholes. Is there a treaty that guarantees the signal will always be on and reliable? Nope. If an outage causes massive economic damage, is it clear who's legally liable? Not at all. And what's the biggest gap of all? This massive exception for national security that lets a country degrade or even deny the signal. And when disputes happen, there's no court you can go to. It all just boils down to diplomacy. This really gets to the core conflict here. On one side, you have this amazing global public good, a free service that powers economies. But on the other side, the systems providing that service, like America's GPS, were built by and are still run by the military. This creates this fundamental tension. It's a civilian utility that can be turned into a weapon, with very few, if any, clear legal limits. And this isn't just a theoretical problem. It has actually happened before. Let's talk about a policy that was known as selective availability. So for years, right up until the year 2000, the United States, which runs the GPS system, intentionally introduced errors into the signal that was available to the public. The really accurate signal was kept just for the US military. This was done for security reasons, of course, but it created huge concerns for the rest of the world about the system's reliability. Then, in 2000, that policy was officially switched off. Now, here's the crucial takeaway from that whole incident. The issue was resolved not through some legal challenge or court ruling, but because of a political decision. It was a policy change. And it just highlights that, in the absence of hard law, the way we govern this critical system relies almost entirely on politics and diplomacy. So, given all these weaknesses, what does the future look like? Are there any efforts today to create clearer rules of the road for space? Well, the most recent attempt to fix this came in 2019, when a UN committee adopted something called the Long-Term Sustainability Guidelines. And the goal is pretty straightforward: to encourage countries to act responsibly, to avoid creating space junk and to prevent messing with each other's satellites. On paper, it's a good step. But, and you probably saw this coming, there is a huge catch. These are guidelines, not laws. They are completely voluntary. They encourage responsible conduct, but they don't and they can't legally force it. It's basically a diplomatic agreement to be nice, not a legal requirement to do so. And that leaves us with this final, really critical question. As we launch headfirst into a new space race, with more countries and more private companies launching their own massive constellations, is a system that's based on voluntary, responsible conduct really enough? Or are we just one political crisis away from the invisible utility that runs our entire world simply being switched off? That's the challenge for this next chapter of the space age.